Every day, we are faced with a steady stream of decisions, right? Do we wear the red patent leather shoes? Do we wear the sequins sneakers, right? Most of the decisions are pretty mundane like that. But some decisions are more important than others, and some will actually haunt you for the rest of your life if you haven't selected appropriately. Researchers at Cornell University, in fact, found that we make 226.7 decisions on food choices alone every single day. And every minute that we're driving, we make thousands of decisions, most of them without our knowledge, without even knowing it, really on a subconscious level, right? One of the things that I think we need to do very consciously, and that we probably don't think about enough, is thinking about our personal brand. What is our leadership brand? And that's really what I want to talk to you all about tonight. Leadership brand is probably one of the most important decisions you can make. It'll either make or break your career, but I think very few of us actually take the time to figure that out. I think many of us subscribe to Woody Allen's adage. His adage was 80% of success is just showing up, right? We've all heard that. So we think we show up at work day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, and by golly, they're going to recognize my hard work and my dedication, and surely, I hope that I will get promoted, recognized, and rewarded. But of course, we have to remind ourselves that hope is not a strategy. Planning and conscious action is the strategy, right? I also have to remind all of us that 80%, the Pareto Principle, if you're all familiar with that, 80% of your effort typically only accounts for 20% of your output. You've heard it said that 20% of your customers account for 80% of a company's sales. 20% of your to-do list counts for 80% of your success, or 2 out of the 10 items are the ones you should focus on. The same is really true in leadership positions and making that conscious decision. So I say it's not just about how you show up, or it's not just about showing up, but it's how you show up as a leader in the workplace. And I think there are 3 ways that we can show up in the workplace. I'm focusing this really a little bit to the women in this room, but I think we can, it applies probably equally. I think we can show up in the workplace, not at home, as either a female leader, and I'll get into each one in detail, as a functional leader, or as a business first leader. So what do I mean by a female leader? So when you show up at work, do you show up as a working mom, really very proud of the fact that you're balancing work and life and career, and doing it all capably, pulling it all together? Or do you leave your personal life at the door? Do you keep your personal life personal? When you show up at work, what do you wear? Now that should be a personal decision, but sometimes women send very conflicting messages to their coworkers, and they're not sure if they're looking for a raise, a promotion, or they're really looking for a date. So that is a conscious choice you can make. One of the things, so at the workplace, do you show up as a mommy? Do you show up as a fashionista? Do you show up as a swinging single, an independent woman, a feminist, or all of the above, or none of the above? I think that's a very conscious choice that we can all make. And self-identification really doesn't apply just to gender. It applies equally to race, ethnicity, religion, age, class, diversity, sexual orientation, and more. So how do you show up in the workplace? The second way a lot of women show up in the workplace is as a functional leader. I think you know what I mean by a functional leader. Are you the type that people say, wow, she really gets stuff done, or she's an excellent project manager, or she's very good with numbers, or she's a great administrator, or a creative? There's nothing wrong with having strengths that people look to you and try to solicit for other roles within the company, but you lead first with the fact that you're a functional leader rather than other ways of leading. That's, again, a very conscious choice. The third way I say that you can show up in the workplace is as a business first leader. And I spend a lot of time thinking about business first leader. And it really doesn't mean you're all business and all boring, although some business first leaders are all business and all boring. It doesn't mean that you've made the choice of career over family, but it does mean that you always put the company or your customers before your team and before yourself. Now I know that probably sounds like a baby boomer generalization, that might have worked in your generation. That certainly doesn't work today, but I dare say I think it does work today. So let me use an example. So let's say, since it's October, it's the end of the fiscal year for a lot of companies. Many companies are looking for leaders to pull back on any unnecessary spending or new hires, right? You've probably had that scenario before. So there's three ways you can think of this. You can think about it as yourself, thinking of yourself first and saying, gosh, I have a lean team, I don't have enough budget as it is, the legal department has twice as many headcount as I do, HR has twice as much budget as I do. That doesn't make sense, I'm just going to go business as usual. That's thinking, putting yourself first. The second way you can approach is putting your team first. You could say, geez, that's really too bad that the company's suffering some financial setbacks and really looking to pull back on some discretionary spending this last quarter of the year. But, my team is already overworked. It's already, we're burning the midnight oil. I don't think I'm going to make any of those changes, even though you could hire some temporary contract employees or agency to fill in the gap. The third way as a business first leader is to really say, my company's in a bind. They're looking for leaders to step up, to do what's right for their customers, for our customers, as well as for the business. I have some suggestions to make as far as putting my discretionary spending or my new hires on hold until the company goes through this belt-tightening exercise and emerges on the other end. So I think those are three very conscious decisions. And as you mentioned in the introduction, I've led a lot of transformations, and I've seen a lot of ways that leaders think about this stuff. Because typically when you have a transformation, it is a belt-tightening exercise, and people are looking to do more with less. And they react very predictably, team first, or self first, team first, or business first. And 9 out of 10 times, the people that put their companies first and put their customers first emerged out of these transformations relatively unscathed. I know it sounds like a panacea, but believe me, it actually does work. So what are the characteristics of a business first leader? So I have 5 that I like to talk through at a high level, and then we'll get into some strategies for transforming into a business first leader. The first is business first leaders are agile. They're both agile or nimble in both movement as well as in thought. So they're able to take large amounts of information, digest it, distill it, and present it in a very simple way. That's agility in action, that's being nimble in action. They're also able to bounce back, sway with the punches, so to speak, or pivot when any setbacks occur. The second trait I've observed in business first leaders is that they are lean. And by lean, I mean that they keep their teams and their organizations and their processes lean and nimble. They know that having bloated organizations or excess headcount or inefficient processes really slow them down and prevent them from being agile. The third characteristic that I've noticed is that they are effective. Not efficient, they could be efficient as well, but they're effective. They really focus on effectiveness. I think as women leaders, we tend to be very efficient. We love our to-do lists, and we love checking off all the things on our to-do list at the end of every day. It gives us a big sense of satisfaction, myself included. But we have to remind ourselves that being efficient is not necessarily being effective, right? If we're looking only at outputs and not really looking at outcomes, we're really looking at the wrong side of the equation. Peter Drucker, to use what Trey said earlier, I like Peter Drucker's quotes too. He says, management is doing things right. Leadership is doing the right things. So that's a choice we can consciously make in the workplace. The fourth characteristic of a business first leader is they're accountable. They're not only accountable for the outcome of their project or their initiative or their programs or their department, but they're really accountable to the top and bottom line of the company. They've made that connection mentally and physically between what they do day in and day out, what their department does, and how it relates to both the top line growth of the company and the bottom line productivity or margins of the company. And they've made that very clear connection, and they've shared that with their team so they can all see how their work advances the cause of the company. And the fifth trait of a business first leader is that they are learning. They are lifelong learners. And I think that's a very important characteristic. Not only, you've heard of the 70-20-10 in learning and development, they have the 70-20-10 policy or rationale or whatever you want to call it. And they say 70% of all of our learning is done through on-the-job training, through experience. And that's usually true. So if you stay in the same job year after year, you're not getting the benefit of the on-the-job experience or of that on-the-job learning. 20% of your learning comes from mentors or coaches. And 10% of your learning is really self-initiated through webinars, through podcasts, through seminars such as this, conferences such as this, where you're really expanding your horizon. So a commitment to lifelong learning, I think, is a very key trait of a business first leader. Now, one of the good things is that there are a lot of role models that have come before us that have really exhibited business first leadership. And some of them are people that I have a little quiz, and I'm going to give a copy of my book to anyone who has the answer to some of these. Does anyone know who was the first female CEO to be appointed CEO of a Fortune 500 company? Anybody know the first female CEO, Fortune 500 company? Okay. Oh, darn. So it was in the newspaper industry in Washington.
Oh, the Post.
Sometimes called the failing Washington Post.
Yeah.
So Catherine Gray, this might be before your time. I'm going to get to something more modern in a moment. This is not before my time.
I saw the movie.
But Catherine Gray, she's the first female CEO of a Fortune 500 company. You should know her. You should know her life story. She was president 9 years prior to that. I'm very inspired. If you don't have mentors or coaches of your own, look up some of these inspiring people who have made it and learn what they did. Catherine Graham was the only female in a room full of males. And that room full of males was the newsroom. And she rose to success. And as you know, the Washington Post was recently sold by her grandniece, I believe, to Jeff Bezos of Amazon, right? It's a private. Okay, another question. Who was the first African American CEO of a Fortune 500 company? Oh, come on. Okay, 2009, she started out as an intern and rose all the way to CEO. Yeah?
Oprah Winfrey?
No. Oh, who was that? Somebody said it. I heard it. Ursula Burns. Very good. Ding, ding, ding. You did a copy of my book. Good. Ursula Burns. Now, that was in 2009. I'm from Rochester, New York, and she was the CEO of Xerox. So I spent 16 years in Rochester. What was interesting about Ursula Burns in the year 2009, not only was she the first African-American CEO of a Fortune 500 company, it was the first female CEO to CEO transfer. A woman named Anne Mulcahy, she wasn't the first CEO of a Fortune 500 company, she was the CEO of Xerox. And she passed the reins on to another female CEO. I think that's pretty significant. I have an easy one. Okay, this is an easy one. Who was the first woman CEO to break through the ranks of a major automaker?
Mary Bear.
Hey, there you go.
I work for GM.
Right from Waterford, Michigan, right? And she still is a CEO and one of the 23 featured on. And her salary, $22.6 million last year, is more than any other automotive CEO in the world. I have one more, and then I'll get to some strategies. This is fun. Who was this is too hard, but I'll give you a hint. Who was the first woman CEO to lead a company on the Dow Jones Industrial Average? You're probably saying, all this corporate stuff, who cares? Okay, I'll give you a little hint. I used to work for this company. I worked for this woman. She also ran as a Republican candidate in 2016 and is Ted Cruz's running mate. Ooh.
Carly
Ding,
Fiorina.
ding, ding. Very good. Carly Fiorina. She was the CEO of Hewlett Packard, where I spent 14 years of my career. She joined in 2009. Yes, 2000. What year did she join? I'm sorry, 1999. And I joined HP in 1998. And she was the second CEO female. We've had two female CEOs at HP over my tenure there, and very progressive in diversity and inclusion. So good, come afterward and I'll give you a copy of my new book. So, good. I think it's important though, the reason that I mention this is because the question I want to ask you actually is, how do you show up? Do you show up as a female leader? Do you lead with the fact that you're a feminist? Do you lead as a functional leader, or do you lead as a business first leader? The good news is that choice is yours. It's really a choice you can make day in and day out. So let me give you quickly 3 strategies that I think will help you, if you want, to transition to a business first leader. The first strategy I talk about is your narrative. Your narrative is your identity. I think there's 2 narratives we have. There's an internal narrative that all of us have, the internal voice, what we think about, what we consume our thoughts about. And then there's the external narrative, what we talk about to our coworkers, to our boss, to our colleagues, etc. So there's a famous quote by Eleanor Roosevelt that I really like, and she says, "Great minds discuss ideas, average minds discuss events, and small minds discuss people." And it really resonates with me because I do think what we fill our minds with and our thoughts is really who we are and who we become. If we talk about the people on the team or the other departments or how legal or finance is doing things right, you're really talking about people or events. But if you're talking about ideas and opportunities to really propel your company and your business forward, it's a whole different dialogue, and that will be recognized. Believe me, it will be recognized. The second strategy that I have for becoming a business first leader is really to say yes, to raise your hand to that special assignment. Now, I know most people are overworked and underpaid, and they feel like, I'm not going to take on a night job, work nights and weekends, but it's really worked, and I think Cindy mentioned that when she did extra work for people that she admired at work and how it raised her personal profile. I, over my career, also have raised my hand on many the companies are never short of things to do. They have more initiatives and more projects than there ever is time to do. What they are short of is resources to get them done. So if you make it a habit of raising your hand to lead a brainstorming session, to lead a project where you get 6 people together and come up with a solution on behalf of a pressing problem that might be needed by the company, I guarantee you those will go a long way in making you perceived as a business first leader and making you more valuable and recognized as a leader in the corporate world. There's a quote by Oliver Wendell Holmes that says, "A mind that is stretched by a new experience can never go back to its original dimensions." And that's very true. A new experience really can change you and alter you in ways that you've never imagined. I've raised my hand many a times. I've also been drafted many a times into projects that I really wasn't that interested in. Some of them have taken me outside of marketing. Some of them have put me square dab right in the middle of transforming marketing. But they've always been wonderful experiences to work on an initiative that management deemed was important and that got recognition. So I would encourage you to make it a habit of raising your hand and saying yes. And the third strategy I'd like to recommend is really building a sisterhood. And it's really interesting because I don't think I've spent as much time in my career doing this as I could have. Over the years I've had lots of budget and people authority, and I probably could have made a more concerted effort. Frankly, I was always a little cautious about how that might be perceived, that I was hiring my cronies or my girls or whatever. And so I shied away from it. I always strove to have a good balance of gender diversity on the team, and also thought diversity, I think, has always been very, very important. But as I look at it more now, I think we do have an opportunity. There's a lot of stereotypes about women in leadership, a lot of stereotypes about women, derogatory terms about women that you never hear used for men. You know, women are sissies, they're tomboys. If they dare act competent and intelligent, they're called nasty women. You know, then you have people like Margaret Thatcher, who's called the Iron Woman. Why are there so many stereotypes for women that because they're outside of their feminine characteristics? Now, if males do that, if males chew out someone or make an unpopular decision, they'll be respected and they'll be liked. And they'll say, he's just doing his job. But if females do it, they get all sorts of labels. So I do think forming that sisterhood, recognizing the labels and the stereotypes that are out there, and trying to deal with it and overcome it and talk about it openly. I love the Always has wonderful commercials, like a girl. You know, the stereotype of you throw like a girl, you fight like a girl, you run like a girl. I love the ads that they did to really break that stereotype and make it celebrated rather than something that is to be ashamed of, or something that is not as important or recognized as the male counterpart. So those really are the three strategies that I have outlined for becoming a business first leader. I plan to really devote some time next year to focusing on, I have a list of 50 things that we can all do as a community. I do think building that sisterhood is important. Mentorship, coaching, and really just encouraging each other. I've been very fortunate, I have to say, over my career. I have never felt like I was held back by any of the male leaders. I always felt that I was encouraged, you know, either by my sons, by my husband, by my family, by my brothers. I was never felt like they didn't want me to get ahead or achieve. Even the bosses I had at work. I always think that we are our own worst enemy, women, in many regards. I think we hold ourselves back by some of the stereotypes, and we're afraid, as Cindy said earlier, that, you know, if we don't meet 100% of the job requirements for a job, we won't apply. You know, so we really set ourselves up in some cases for failure. So I would encourage you all to break down those stereotypes, help each other out, and help us to prove each other right, not wrong. So thank you very much for your time.